during an internet roundtable streamed from the White House. Mr. Obama received heavy Latino support in 2008, but it's been slipping. Some big Republican donors have been phoning up New Jersey Governor Chris Christie. So far, he says he's not interested in a presidential bid. Here he is after a speech last night in California responding to a plea to jump into the race.
That heartfelt message you gave me is also not a reason for me to do it. That reason has to reside inside me.
Still, Christie hasn't definitively ruled out a run, and he says Americans are frustrated with Mr. Obama and waiting for the president to act on major issues. Paul Brown, NPR News.
This is NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from ESET. This is Wisconsin Public Radio News. I'm Terry Bell. 5 school districts in Wisconsin will get back $30 million from an investment bank thanks to a settlement with the Securities and Exchange Commission. Chuck Quirmbach has details.
A few years ago, school districts in Waukesha, Kenosha, Whitefish Bay, West Allis, and Kimberly paid $200 million in district funds and loans for an investment package called synthetic collateralized debt obligations. The districts wanted to fund retiree benefits with the gains. But the investments went bad, and now the SEC has ruled that one of the sellers of the packages, RBC Capital, knew the packages were unsuitable and should have better disclosed the risks. The district's attorney, Stephen Kravitz, says he's happy that $30 million is coming back to the schools.
The SEC has said this is a teaching moment for other sellers and packagers of these kinds of investments, or any investment, to not skip a step and to know that what they are selling is suitable for the purchase.
RBC admits no wrongdoing. The firm and another seller of the debt deals, Stifel Financial, also face civil lawsuits from the school districts. And the SEC is still pursuing Stifel. Chuck Quirmbach, Wisconsin Public Radio.
The Wisconsin Supreme Court is scheduled to discuss proposed new rules about when to recuse themselves from cases. The discussion this afternoon is intended to improve the public's trust and confidence in the state's high court. A suspect is in jail for Milwaukee's second daytime murder in the past 2 days. Officials say a man was killed around 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon on the city's north side. Other details were not immediately available. Also yesterday, police say they were still looking for a suspect in an early afternoon shooting death on Monday. This is Wisconsin Public Radio News.
Support for WPR comes from Bergstrom Mahler Museum of Neenah, announcing Arts of Fire, featuring live glassmaking demonstrations by artists from the Corning Museum of Glass, October 6th through the 9th. Information at artsoffire.org.
Where we talk about issues that matter to you, this is Wisconsin Public Radio's Ideas Network Internet Service.
A week ago today, the state of Georgia executed convicted murderer Troy Davis. It was a highly controversial death penalty case, and it leads us to today's big question. Do you support or oppose the death penalty, and why? I'm Joy Cardine. This is the Ideas Network of Wisconsin Public Radio. It is 7:37 on this Wednesday, September the 28th. We have 2 guests with us who hold differing views on capital punishment, and we welcome your questions for them or the points you would like them to debate at 1-800-642-1234. At the end of the debate, we will invite you to sound off on air with your reasons for supporting or opposing capital punishment. We also invite you to vote in our weekly Big Question online poll at wpr.org/joy. There's also a link to that poll on the Joy Cardine Show Facebook page. Our guests, once again, Mark Clements is a spokesman and board member for the Campaign to End the Death Penalty, and Dudley Sharp is a pro-death penalty expert and victims' rights advocate. And our next caller is Fred in Rome. Hello, Fred.
Good afternoon, or good morning, folks, on this beautiful day in Wisconsin. Look, I agree that beyond a reasonable doubt, they shouldn't be put to death, but you've got these John Wayne Gacy's out in the world, and they should be put to death right away. people that they're victimized can't say a prayer. They can't make their last confession, say goodbye. These people are not human beings. As far as I'm concerned, they should be put to death. Now, again, I agree that beyond a reasonable doubt shouldn't be done, but these people are not human beings. As far as I'm concerned, they should be put to death, and the sooner the better, and thank you for my call.
Well, thank you for making the call, Fred. I know Fred also was concerned about paying for a John Wayne Gacy to spend the rest of his life in prison. Mark Clements, your response to that?
Well, statistics clearly show that it costs less to house someone inside of a prison than it costs to carry out a execution. Unfortunately for Mr. Gacy's situation, these were horrible crimes that were committed. Unfortunately, in Mr. Gacy's situation, who is it to say that his life should be taken and he should be executed rather than to be placed inside of a prison and prison to do its job, and that job is to rehabilitate offenders. Unfortunately, we have lost focus upon our prison system, and now we're saying that, well, house these men inside of a prison for the rest of their lives, that they cannot be rehabilitated. I totally disagree.
Yeah, so you think that someone convicted of a murder can and should be rehabilitated and released?
Correct. I believe that a man or woman that is incarcerated inside of any prison should have a start day and a finish day inside of our prison systems, and it should come with good reform of rehabilitation. Unfortunately, government has sidetracked that spending and is spending that money in other areas rather than rehabilitate.
Sounds like we have a dog situation somewhere, but so let me is that your dog, Mark?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, that was mine.
Okay. Did you finish your point, Mark?
Yes.
Okay, so Dudley Sharp.
Well, I disagree with your caller on one point. I think murderers are human beings, and so he and I disagree on that point. Secondly, we have the right to execute people just as we have the right to take their freedom away. It's the same right. The state has the right to take freedom away. The state has the right to take life away, not only legally, but morally as well. And regarding rehabilitation, I mean, some people can be rehabilitated. But if we're going to risk making the wrong decision on rehabilitation, I would rather risk either executing them or never letting them out of prison to protect more innocent people. The risk we have now, I mean, probably at least 100,000 people have been murdered in the United States since 1973 by people serving parole and probation, where the prison system or people within the legal system have made the wrong decision to let people out of prison thinking that they were somehow rehabilitated. And also since 1973, we've had about 28,000 additional innocent people who were murdered by people who had murdered before. So we make wrong judgments constantly on people's rehabilitation. I would much rather have less innocent victims and keep people who might be rehabilitated in prison longer to protect innocent people in the free world.
Let's move to another call. Steve in Stevens Point is with us next, I think. Yes, Steve,
Hi,
go ahead.
Thank you for the program. Thanks for taking my call. I was a criminal justice major in college, and I graduated completely disenfranchised with the entire system. The death penalty in particular is the epitome of what is wrong with the criminal justice system. Early on in my criminal justice program, I learned that for penalties to be effective, they have to be swift, they have to be severe, and they have to be certain. And while the death penalty definitely meets the severity measure, it is neither swift nor is it certain, and that can be said pretty much about the entire criminal justice system as a whole. There's no way you can argue that the death penalty is an effective deterrent to crime especially with the statistics that states that don't have the death penalty have lower rates of violent crime. So I just want to get your response on that. I don't expect to change anybody's mind.
Yeah, well, let's get first Dudley Sharp to respond.
I agree with him on one point, that deterrence would be enhanced with all criminal sanctions if the sanctions came quicker and more severe. All the deterrent studies on the death penalty, the 27 studies since the year 2000 that have found for a deterrent effect of the death penalty, it has nothing to do with the speed in which we give it. It is based on when the execution occurs. That is when you get the deterrent effect. Some of those authors have stated if you made the system quicker, it would enhance the deterrent effect even more. But I'm with the gentleman that just called in that I have a huge number of complaints about the criminal justice system myself, most having to do with how many additional innocent people are harmed and murdered when we either don't incarcerate these people or we let them out early, numbers which are 1,000 times worse than the Innocence Project, who discovers innocent people in prison. One is, they're both bad, but one is so unbelievably larger than the other, the one that I'm speaking of, that it's astounding there are not a whole bunch of Innocence Project to protect innocent people in the public.
Mark Clements?
Once again, I totally disagree, and I totally disagree under the grounds that statistics have shown that once people have served at least 20 years of imprisonment and have been released, the deterrent rate is so low, it's almost off of the radar. Once again, this is a society which sentences youth as young as 13 years of age to the rest of their lives inside of a prison. I do not see any deterrent in crime as a result of sentencing those kids to prison. I do not see any deterrent to crime and sentencing a man to natural life. Crime rates in Georgia have not went down. Crime rates in Indiana have not went down. Matter of fact, Indiana was known as the murder capital just a couple of years ago. We must look at rehabilitating these men and women that are sentenced to these prisons. It takes government to give the money so that these rehabilitation programs can sustain themselves. Unfortunately, government has taken that money away, and government is using that money to fatten its own pockets rather than to do their jobs. And that is, once again, to rehabilitate these men. Statistics have shown that once these offenders are rehabilitated, chances are them returning back to the criminal justice system is just slim to none.
Our next caller is Ken in Wisconsin Dells. Hello, Ken.
Good morning.
Yes, go ahead, please.
I had a question for Mr. Clements. Does he believe in inmates who are already sentenced to prison who kill other inmates in prison or staff members after they've been incarcerated? Does he believe in the death penalty for those individuals who apparently are not going to be affected by rehabilitation?
I will answer that question, and I will answer that question under the grounds that being a person labeled as a criminal for 28 years of my life, I've seen much of the going-ons behind prison walls. First of all, most of our correctional officials are unprofessional. They use no ethical standards, and half of them harass the inmates. In some of these horrible cases that have been described as horrible, they were not horrible as described before the media. And I have seen inmates kill correctional officers, but what led to them killing them? I could say in one case, without mentioning any names, is harassment by the guards. So that's an area that needs to be changed within our prison systems. and it needs to be changed immediately within our prison system, how guards treat the offenders.
A response, Dudley Sharp?
Yeah, it would have been nice if Mark had answered the question. And the question basically is this, or the answer is, executed murderers don't harm and murder again. Lifers do harm and murder again. Prisoners do harm and murder again. And Mark says prison guards, quote, have no ethical standards. I don't know what you can do with someone who says something like that as if it's credible.
Here's a Facebook comment from Boyd. Capital punishment does not deter crime, but more importantly, many family members of the victim still have a difficult time finding closure after the perpetrator has been executed. Dudley Sharp?
There is no closure. Anybody, I know a whole bunch of crime victim family members whose loved ones have been murdered and whose perpetrator was put on death row and executed. I've never found anybody to get closure, and I think even suggesting that you could get emotional or psychological closure after losing an innocent loved one to murder and having the guilty murderer executed I can't imagine anybody considering that closure would exist. I don't know why it would.
Yeah, and I don't think you will debate that, Mark Clements.
There, once again, is no closure. Now, this is something that me and Mr. Sharp can agree upon. There is no closure once someone takes the life of someone's loved one. I do agree with that 100%. However, in the case of Mr. Davis, that is what the family rests upon, that now finally they can receive closure. How can you receive closure once you have lost your loved one?
That's specifically the opposite of what the McPhail family said. What the mother of Officer McPhail said specifically was, I will have peace now, but I will never have closure.
Well, that's not what I read.
Well, let me get you both to give us a final or closing argument as we close out our big question debate on capital punishment. We will start with Mark Clements. Why should we campaign to end the death penalty, the name of your organization?
Well, basically, due to the fact that the death penalty is racist, the death penalty has proven to be flawed. It has shown that more than it has showed that time and time again that prosecutors use the death penalty as a weapon to even get some offenders to go against other offenders, knowing that those offenders were lying to draw convictions. This is where I have a major problem at. The death penalty should not be used as a weapon. The death penalty should not be used as a tool for prosecutors to gain just merely convictions. But the death penalty was put in play as a way to deter crime, which it has not done. It was put into play to also take the worst of the worst offenders off of the street, which has not been done. Crime occurs each and every day, and just lynching these men is just totally wrong. And in closure, men that are young as 13 years old, young girls and boys, being sentenced to prison for the rest of their lives as young kids, I do not agree with that, nor do I agree with the death penalty. The death penalty has proven to be racist towards poor people, minus the color.
Well, given those concerns, Dudley Sharp, in your closing arguments, why should the states that have the death penalty keep the death penalty?
Not only should they keep them, all of the states that don't have it should get it. For one reason primarily, which is the reason we give all sanctions, is in some cases, it's the most just penalty available. The nature of the crimes is what provides the nature of the sanction, whether it be probation to the death penalty. When we look at certain crimes, the rape and murder of children, the murder of police officers, the torture and murder of people, John Wayne Gacy is a perfect example, 33 young men raped, murdered, and tortured. What is a proportional punishment to that? We don't have one, but the most proportionate to that would be to take their life away because they have forfeited their right to life by their crime, just as criminals in prison have forfeited their right to freedom by the nature of their crime.
Dudley Sharp is a pro-death penalty expert, a victim rights advocate, and Mark Clements, a spokesman and board member for the Campaign to End the Death Penalty. Our two big question debaters this week, and now it's your turn to sound off. Do you support or oppose capital punishment, and why? 1-800-642-1234 or send an email to talk@wpr.org or post on the Joy Cardine Show Facebook page. This is the Ideas Network of Wisconsin Public Radio.
Hi, this is Ben Merrins, host of At Issue, inviting you to join guest host Gene Purcell today as he